Hey, everybody. Okay, so on Thursday, when we met for the first time, I had major technological difficulties when it came to my PowerPoint and was on the phone with John literally right up until we started, which consequently meant that I did not get Thursday recorded. And so there were a few ladies who were not able to be there, and I had promised I would try to do this. And so we're going to give Zoom a whirl and record through that. I know Julie used Vimeo, but I'm not as familiar with it. And honestly, she said she recorded on her cell phone, which was mind boggling because I just don't know if my cell phone would hold a video for a 30 minutes to an hour long session. So we're going to go with the Zoom for now. Hopefully, everybody's okay with that. If I can figure out that my cell phone will do Vimeo and it will actually hold a file that large, I'll go back to that because I know that's what everybody's really familiar with. But so for now, here we are. We're on Zoom. I haven't been on Zoom since 2020, I don't think. So this feels a little weird, but anyways, I wanted to give everyone who wasn't able to be there the content that we had on Thursday. That way, when we meet again this week, we'll all be on the exact same page, which will be super exciting. So one of the things that I started out by sharing was a little bit about my personal story, my personal testimony, and it plays a really big role as to why I'm so passionate about this. So I wanted to make sure that it was shared with you all as well. And so some of this is probably familiar. A lot of you who know me well have at least heard tidbits of this. But for those of you who don't know me that well or don't know the full story, this will give you that picture and hopefully kind of plant the seeds for understanding why this is something that I take so personally and feel such a responsibility for. And so I was saved when I was 9 years old. I was raised in the Assemblies of God, so slightly different denomination. Obviously, I identify very much when Pastor says that he's Pentecostal. But I was saved when I was 9 and, grew up in the church. And like I think most people who are saved at a very young age, at some point you sort of have some wayward years. Maybe they're not super severe, but they are wayward. And anyways, mine weren't terrible, but I went to college and I was really passionate about psychology because of my grandfather. He was a psych instructor. And so I was like, I'm going to go into psychology. This will be great. And then I'll be a teacher. Well, lo and behold, you don't really go into psychology and become a teacher without having some experience. And you don't have that unless you pursue your psychology degree to the master's and the doctorate level. And unfortunately, I went through the program pretty quickly. And by the time I got to the last semester of it, I just knew without a shadow of a doubt the counseling 40 hours a week was not Heather's passion. And so I obviously completed the degree. It was too far along to back out of it. And I wasn't about to start something else that I just wasn't sure was the right step for me. So I graduated at 20 and said, just going to keep working the job I'm working, which at the time was as a pharmacy technician for CVS. And so I did. And I spent quite a few years there actually, trying to just kind of figure out like what's the next step, what am I passionate about, what I really love to do. Um, One of my strengths from the Strengths Finder test, for those of you who've ever done it, actually my number one strength is a learner. I love to learn. I am a very big nerd. My husband can confirm that for you in the event that you have any doubts. And anyways, the church I attended at that time was an Assemblies of God church back up in Winston-Salem. That's where we're kind of from. And there's a university associated with the denominations actually located down in Florida. As a matter of fact, they have a campus in Concord down where Multiply is. But the university offered a cohort, a small cohort in Winston-Salem in their master's program for ministerial leadership. And I suppose when you're not sure what you want to do for your next step, financial debt sounds like the right thing to do. So in my middle 20s, I thought, this is it. I'm going to take this degree. This will be great. And I definitely felt like it was the right next step for me. But it was a really wonderful cohort, great teachers, great people to learn together. But my most favorite class out of the whole program was biblical exposition. And so, having grown up in the church, I was overly familiar with most of the Bible stories. I'd read through the Bible a couple of times, and I was sort of blown away in this class at how little I actually knew about how to study the Bible. We learned big words like exegesis and hermeneutics, which a couple of the ladies on Thursday said, yeah, we definitely looked that up. And they're just big words, and we'll go over them too. I don't want anybody to feel like they're in over their heads. They're just words. And but they taught us how to do it. And I realized that I'd never learned how to learn about the Bible. And it was both very convicting and very saddening for me at the same time, because I was 25 and I thought about all the years previous that I could have been really digging into the Word of God. And that class under Dr. Hackett just opened my eyes in a way, opened my eyes to the Word in a way that I'd just never seen it before. And it really became something I was very passionate about. I already knew I loved to teach, that I'd kind of gathered over the years in the positions I'd been in the pharmacy. And at that point, I was actually beginning to teach at one of the community colleges within their program for pharmacy. And so when I got out of this program, it really felt like the direction I wanted to go. I loved the Bible. I loved studying it. I loved learning. And there's no better way to make a living than to be a teacher, because then they pay you to learn all the time. But I just loved reading the Bible, and I loved the depth that I'd never seen before, just in my own personal study, until I had taken that class. And then I realized how many layers of the Bible I had not removed in order to dig into them specifically and see how they all work together. I mean, I already saw the beauty of the Bible as one story, but then when you start really digging in, it's just game changing. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this. And I'm very excited. There was a great group on Thursday of ladies that were there, and there was a great group of you who weren't there. So I'm excited that you're going to be able to come this week. It'll be awesome. But I wanted to walk through a few things, and sort of today, for this first week, all we're really going to do is get a, sort of an overview. That's my hope. Kind of broadcast where we're going to go in the next 7 weeks, so that we have an idea and we have a kind of a map for that. And so I think this is something that's really important, that we not relegate to pastors alone or formal teachers alone. There's multitudes of reasons for that. Obviously, in a mix of ladies, we have everything from moms to grandmas to Sunday school teachers to pastoral support in some capacity. And when we are enriched in how we study, then we are able to influence the people within our spheres of influence. You know, it may be our immediate family, but it may be the larger family. It may be that it's the church as a whole. It's obviously all of our social circles we interact in. And so for me, this is, though it may seem like a little bit of work, this is something that's so important that we not just leave for pastor to do for us. It is something that we're called to do. Second Timothy calls us to study, to show ourselves approved, right? And so that we can rightly divide the word of God. And yes, Timothy was a teacher for context's sake, but we're all teaching someone, even if all we're doing is that they're learning from what we're modeling. And so I want us to understand the importance of doing this as well. Obviously, I'm really passionate about it, and I hope that kind of catches everybody on fire for it too. But I think it's something we're called to do biblically. I don't think it's something that we're supposed to just leave and let a pastor do for us. A lot of times we think about the analogy of, if I give you a fish, then you have a fish for a day. But if I teach you to fish, you can fish for a lifetime. It's the same concept. You know, I can give you a Bible story that I've broken down for devotion. But if I teach you how to create that devotion yourself, then you can teach others. And it's just a beautiful factor of multiplication, which pastors has talked about quite a bit. And specifically this past Sunday, I just thought the timing was so wonderful. He talked about that. You know, we can add, but if everyone's adding, we get multiplication for the church. And that is the ultimate outcome, right? Know Christ better personally, but then make him known in a large capacity in a big way. And so that's what we're going to do. It's going to be super fun. Hopefully everybody enjoys it. A couple of things as we get started. I just want to kind of warn you all, just like I did with the other ladies on Thursday, there are some potential pitfalls with proceeding through something like this. You may identify with them, you may not, and that's okay. I definitely identified with both of these at times. And so for me, it is personal, which is why I share it with you. It is really common for people who progress through this exposition journey to sometimes come out on the other end kind of critical, where you sit in a lesson or you sit in a sermon or you hear a speaker at an event, and maybe it's a text they're covering that you've really studied in depth, and they say something and you go, oh, that's so wrong, and you become critical. You know, they didn't they didn't look into that word correctly, or they might have skewed the meaning of that a tad bit, or that was definitely not where that happened, or those kinds of things where we become critical and our spirit focuses on that instead of what the Lord is illuminating and bringing to our hearts for change. And so, having a critical spirit is something I just want you to be cautious about. And I have some sort of protective measures that you can use to guard against that. I think it's very important. But then one of the other big things that can happen is something called distanciation. And so, another big word, it simply means that you distance yourself from it. We can learn everything we want to learn, and they can go inside of our head, and we can fill our brains full of so much knowledge, but if it never travels this 12 inches and makes it to our heart, it's useless. It's completely useless. This is great, but it's got to be applicable. It's got to change our lives, right? It's supposed to pierce us asunder. If we only have it up here and we block it off because we just want it to be knowledge based, but we don't ever want it to have change for us where we understand in our spirit what the Lord is saying in the word, that's terrible. We don't want that to happen. We don't want to separate ourselves from that. And so I will send the PowerPoints because it's been so long since I shared a screen on Zoom. And I suppose it's probably not terribly difficult, but I also don't see where it's popping up quickly. Oh, actually, hold on. Let's do a quick screen share here. And hopefully this will also play the PowerPoint. If it doesn't, I'm going to go right back on to where I was. There we go. Okay. So a couple of things that we can use to guard against these pitfalls are actually prayers from Tara Lee Cobble. If you're not familiar with Tara Lee does the Bible recap, and Tara Lee also does D group, which happens on Wednesday nights here, as a matter of fact. But she has these prayers ahead of every single daily devotion that she does for Bible recap. And I think they're super helpful, right? So the first thing she always says is, God, give me wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, right? So this is the head and the heart. And she starts off right there. Make sure I get both aspects of this, Lord. Don't let me separate myself or distance myself from the true purpose and what we're doing with this work. And then she goes on and says, let any knowledge I gain help me love you and others more and not puff me up. So again, it's the perspective of whatever I do learn, I really want that to be purposeful. I don't want it to be for pride's sake. I don't want it so that I'm the smartest person in the room. I want it so that it's changing my life to love you more deeply and to love those around me, right? Those are the two greatest commandments Jesus gave us, anyways. And then she goes on and says, help me see something new about you that I've never seen before. And that's one of the most beautiful things I think about this expositional journey. We are sometimes overly familiar with what we have read over the years. Actually, Tim Mackey is known for saying, hearing passages in the Bible over and over again, or when the Bible becomes familiar, causes us to lose the vital edge that will pierce our heart. And this to me helps us see that. Lord, help me see something fresh. Don't let me just read through it so fast because I already know what it says. I know this story so well. Help me see something new. And that really is part of why we stop and have pause, honestly. Then she goes on to pray, correct any lies I believe about you or anything I misunderstand. And when we get a little further into this process, we'll talk more about this, but it's not uncommon for us to bring our own context to the scriptures of what we believe or what we already have in our head culturally. And sometimes there's things we just don't understand. That's also true. And so she prays for that clarity and wisdom. And then she closes out and she says, direct my steps according to your words. Amen. So it's not just head knowledge, right? If this isn't turning into action for me, that this is pointless. And you don't want that to be the case at all. So these are some of the pitfalls or some of the prayers that you can utilize to guard against those pitfalls of being critical or distancing yourself from the actual purpose of what we're doing. And I just think these are super, super beautiful, to be honest with you. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to go along something called the interpretive journey. And there's 4 steps to it, which we're going to work our way through. And super funny, I think I brought the wrong notes over here. I totally did. So we're going to work through this just because Heather is very organized, apparently. Anyways, the point of all of this is that we're going to start with step 1, to grasp the text in their town. Okay. So two textbooks that are really helpful if you want to buy them. They're going to be mentioned in your book. They are not required. The first one is Grasping God's Word. It's a textbook, literally the textbook I actually use, but it's a textbook that has an accompanying workbook. But I loved so much, and actually I did just find the right notes. I loved so much that Miss Scarlett, she is Johnny on the spot, y'all. I sent her some stuff and she said, "Oh, I can get it taken care of." And then maybe 10 minutes later, she emailed me and she said, "I have all your workbooks printed." I said, "Oh, oh, it's very fast." So none of these books are required. The third book that I will show you is How to Read God's Word for All It's Worth, or How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. All three of these are mentioned in the workbook that Scarlett printed, that I have copies for you when you come on Thursday, but you don't have to buy them because I took from that workbook and some of the things that were within the class and over the years of just teaching, and I put it all together in the workbook that you get from the church. So you don't have to buy any of it. It's just extra if you want to. But the concepts we're going to go through with the interpretive journey specifically are out of Grasping God's Word. And it's just really, really amazing. It's a great reference book. If you like books, I hoard books. They are my favorite. So entirely up to you. But it starts out with an interpretive journey where we grasp the text in their town. So when we do exegesis, so this is that really big word that simply means, as a follower of Christ, I'm going to do my due diligence in the spiritual discipline of Bible study. That is, I'm going to look at context. I'm going to look at historical context, literary context, the geography, the words in their original language. I'm going to take into account a lot of social factors that were at play. That's all exegesis is. It's just doing your due diligence in the studying of it. Obviously, we can devotionally read, and that's totally fine. That's where we just kind of sit down and we read and we ask the Lord to show us something in the text. And we're not digging really deep or taking a ton of notes or using a bunch of accompanying study guides or any of that sort of thing. And devotional reading is wonderful. The more you read the word, the more it gets into your heart, the better off we all are. But when it comes to actually studying, this is the kind of work we're going to do. And when we do exegesis, we actually stay in step one and step two more than anything. You'll get into step three just a little bit. And then step four is honestly one of the, you spend the least amount of time really in step four, if I'm being honest with you, in terms of the quote unquote overall work. And so when we're in step one, grasping the town and their text, that's where we start out with that concept of exegesis. And the fun part about it is that we typically just answer 6 questions. And most of us from critical reading have learned those 6 questions, but they are who, what, when, where, how, and why. We want to answer who's in this story, who's the primary character, who are the supporting characters. You want to go through and ask the question of what is happening. What is the story? What is being said? What's the plot line? Where is this happening? What location is it happening? When is it happening? Is it Old Testament? Is it New Testament? Are the Israelites, enslaved by Pharaoh, or are we in the New Testament where, though they're not enslaved, they're under the Roman Empire? You want to be able to answer these kinds of questions. And then why is always very important to ask as well. Why ties into step 3 with the principalizing bridge, which we'll get to in a minute. But by being able to answer these 6 questions, you will do an awesome job in step 1 of just grasping the text in their town, studying all of the context and kind of taking ourselves back. If you have ever watched Superbook, that was one of the things I mentioned with this step 1. Superbook's a fun little show with a couple of kids who have a robot, and they'll encounter a moral dilemma in modern day, and the robot will take them back to a Bible story that's applicable, and they'll learn their lesson, and then they'll come forward and they'll apply what they learned. But it's really neat because it picks these kids up and it takes them into it. And so then visually and auditorily, they're hearing and living in that time. And it would be awesome if we could just do that for ourselves. Today I'm going to read in John 4, and we just pick up, and right there we are at the well with a lady at the well with Jesus. We can't quite do that, which is why we have to spend some time working that out, obviously. And so once we've done step 1 and we've gotten all this information about what's happening in their town, we kind of want to lift from that just a couple of sentences that will give us an overview of what was happening. It can be super specific, God commanded Moses in Exodus 3 to blah, 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 blah. Take your brother Aaron, go back to Pharaoh, take this staff. It can be that specific. It can be a little bit more general, where whatever the story is or the text we've read outlines a core doctrine about God. And so you could just write a few phrases about what we've learned about God in that, or what the character learned about God in that situation. Sometimes it's truths about God's character, that he's omnipotent, or that he is the creator, or just different things like that. So sometimes it's very general, sometimes it's very specific, but you want to do all of this work and kind of get it down to one idea. And the reason for that is, once we have all that work done and we get this general idea, the main idea, we move into step 2 there, which is to measure the width of the river we're going to have to cross. So sometimes when we come to the text, we just interject ourselves, and then we say, this is what this means to me specifically right now in this moment. And we don't do all of this work to make sure and be certain that we're rightly dividing the text to find what God spoke to the original audience. And we'll talk about that sort of here in a minute, but it matters what he said to them. We can't start out with what we want it to say for us. We have to start with what was said there first. Okay. I'm grasping the text in their town. The easiest way to think about this is to think about the then and there before we ever get to the here and now. Exegesis is summed up that way: then and there, and doing all the due diligence we need to be knowledgeable about that. And so then when we get into step 2, once we've done all that, we have those general ideas. We're going to measure the width of the river to cross, and have an image at the end of this that I'll show you. But the idea with that is, what's different about us compared to whomever the text is actually about, whomever Jesus was speaking to or God was speaking to. That may be cultural. It may be that it's a man as the main character and we're female. It may be that it was someone in sin and we're not in sin. It might be that they were anxious and we are not. It can be that the language was Hebrew, Greek, or Aramaic. Very clearly, none of us are speaking those things. Or if you are, please let me know. That would be really helpful in this class. But so you want to measure that. What's the difference between them and me? They're back in the day, all the way now to here and now, right? What's the big difference? Because we need to know that and take those things into account before we ever move to crossing over from there and then all the way to step 4, which is where we can grasp the text in our town. And this is what we call hermeneutics. And hermeneutics, simply put, is the application of the general idea of the text after we've done all this work. What is the message that we're lifting from the text? How can that apply in my life right now? When we do cross the principalizing bridge in step 3, one of the big things to always, always take into account is that when we're measuring the river, going back into step 2, if it's Old Testament, we're in the New Testament. We are under New Covenant. The Old Testament's the Old Covenant. That's a very big difference that you always, always want to have in mind. Obviously, it's pretty clear when we're reading the text. Oh, yes, of course. But sometimes we do forget that. That familiarity causes us to forget the richness of being under a new covenant. And so that's the idea. Then we grasp the text in our town. That's where we turn around and we apply those ideas. And to do that, we have to look at the theological principles that we've lifted from this, that we can carry from then and there, that we can carry into the here and now. And to carry on with the Superbook analogy, as silly as it is, these kids go back there and then, and they learn something about God or the truth about the Bible. They learn something from one of these stories, and they come forward in time, and it still applies here and now. And that's because they have experienced the original text in their town, and they've been able to see how whatever was theirs, the theological principle, can carry forward to their own town here and now. And it's really awesome. I mean, this is typically step 4, the grasping the text in our town. That's Let's pastors points of application at the end, or things that you can go out and make this applicable this week, that kind of idea. And so that's what's happening in step 4. And so here's just an image to show it to you. Obviously you can see with number 1 quite clearly this is a biblical time. No cars, no satellites, no cell phones. Got a little shepherd down there on the road. He is going to cross that river there. It says things like culture and language, time and situation. So that's that um, measuring the width of the river we have to cross. What's different between the left side of this picture and the right side of this picture? And the bridge there in the middle is the principalizing bridge. What theoretical and theological principle can we take from here? What core doctrine are we able to take from this text and bring it forward to number 4? We are here. These are obviously new buildings, modern people, etc. There is a number 5 on there, and the reason for that is it's carried from the new editions of the book. Not to date myself, but the book I have is from more than 2 decades ago. So it was broken down in 4 steps, and 5 was largely already included in one of the steps. So the picture shows that, but you don't have to really worry about it. So that is the essence of what we did on Thursday. And then obviously some folks asked some questions and so on and so forth. But one of the biggest points of application that I had in preparation was to share kind of a personal story. It was crazy that this happened, to be honest with you. I love to watch birds. And so just as a final point of why this is so important to me and why I hope you come back and aren't scared and worried. There were quite a few people who were worried about homework. I want everybody to come and have fun. I want you to learn. I want you to enjoy the process. So one of the neatest things that happened for me is I love birds. I bird watch. We have bird feeders everywhere. I've bird watched for a very long time. And, I can glance at my feeder really quickly and say, oh, there's a cardinal there. There's a goldfinch on it. Oh, blue jay flew up. Those kinds of things. On Wednesday, a goldfinch actually flew into one of our doors. So this is the door they always fly into. We have windows directly across, as a matter of fact. And so it just looks like a clear pathway, especially on cloudy days. And we had a goldfinch fly into the window. And very stunned goldfinch. He was not getting up on his own. And I know you're not supposed to touch birds, but I went outside and I picked him up, and he sat on my finger for the better part of 15 minutes. And I've seen goldfinches forever. I just love them. They're beautiful, but there's a difference in seeing them flit by really quickly on the feeder, or even if I stand at the window just for a minute or two, versus being forced to sit with one right here because he's not going to fly off. And one of the things I shared with the ladies is that's the point of exegesis. Devotional reading is great, and I don't ever want to downplay it. I would much rather you devotionally read than not read at all. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed and say, oh, I have to do it like this every time I sit down to my Bible. No, you don't. This is for those times when there's a topic that matters tremendously, something that really is touching your heart, or you feel like the Lord's calling you to dig deeper on, or if there's a passage you really love, or if you're going to teach it. This is what this is for. There may be times you just take notes where certain words start to hit you. You see them over and over and over again, the repetition of them, and you say, you know what, I'm going to make a note of this. And then I'm going to come back to this when I have more time. But for now, I'm devotionally reading because that's what I have the capacity for today and the time for. But I'm going to come back to it. So you make notes in a journal and you come back. That's the birds on the feeder stopping by for a minute, right? This is the goldfinch on your finger for 15 minutes. This is noticing things about his pen feathers and his beak and his little tiny claws, and just how he blinks and why his colorations are the way they are. Biblical exposition, the process of exegesis and hermeneutics, rightly applying the word, is when we sit down with the same little bit of text and over again, we turn it this way and we turn it that way and we look at it and we spend a ton of time with it. That is what we want to do, because then this little goldfinch that I've seen who knows how many times on my feeder, I just feel like I really came to know him in a much deeper way because I actually spent more time with just that one goldfinch. And I was really looking at him and scrutinizing him, not in a negative way, but in a way that was just in awe of how he was made, right? And that's the beauty of the word. God wrote it for us, to us. And when we spend time with it, it's just going to draw us closer to him. And so I'm super excited about this journey. If you have questions, I want you to message me. You can text me or call me. And please just reach out. Otherwise, I'll see you Thursday at 3.